Good afternoon, and welcome back to the second virtual town hall meeting for the town of Fort Macleod. And today we're dealing with crime and the Safe Communities Task Force with some updates. I'd like to welcome our residents and indicate to you that we do have a question option via this virtual platform. So if you have any questions, please feel free to send them throughout the presentations today. We're going to start again today with introductions to my far left, which would be Lisa Gillingham. Just say you are right.
Hi, Lisa Gillingham, Director of Community and Protective Services for the town of Fort Macleod.
Hi, Sergeant Gary McLaren, officer or non-commissioned officer in charge of the Southern Alberta District Crime Reduction Team.
Sergeant Brian Muha with the Fort Macleod Detachment.
And Glenn Stewart, I'm an investigator with the SCAN unit.
And for those of you that don't know me, I'm Sue Keenan. I'm the CAO here in the town of Fort Macleod. I'd like to welcome our panel back. We've had some great success in the last few months. We've got several presentations this afternoon, and then after those presentations, I'll be providing some detailed updates on the Safe Communities Task Force. We've got a lot of good news in that regard. I did want to start by, first of all, thanking our community residents for their involvement in assisting our task force and our stakeholders and being tremendous eyes and ears in our community. Please never be reluctant to call the town or the RCMP office to share any concerns, issues, or to provide feedback. We need you to do that as we can't be everywhere all the time. And I would ask that you continue to be patient. We are making progress. I know it's slow sometimes in the eyes of the public, but when we give you the updates a little bit later in terms of where we're at with specific properties, I think you'll appreciate the work that the committee has done so far. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Mr. Glenn Stewart from SCAN to provide an update for our residents and businesses in the town of Fort Macleod.
Thank you, Sue. So to start off, we started working files in Fort Macleod around the 1st of March. We've now worked on 5 different properties, a total of approximately 16 days. So that's 4 weeks of our working time. In that time, we have produced 4 warning letters, which is a legal document that goes to the owners of the property to inform them that they have a drug problem at their property and that they need to do something about it. Of those 4 warning letters, there's been 2 removals, and one of those removals resulted in a property being boarded up. There's also a 3rd possible removal, and that there's a hearing this afternoon to see whether he'll be removed or not. He's received an eviction notice but has refused to leave. And then there's, like I said, a 4th warning letter that was issued to an owner. Personally, that's approximately 1 warning letter for each 4 days that we work, and we're happy with those numbers. I'd also like to thank, it's not just the SCAN unit that's having this success. I'd like to thank the local RCMP who have been very helpful in our investigations. Also the Lethbridge-based alert team, and of course Town Hall and Sue and Wes, who have been a great help. And most of all, like Sue mentioned earlier, the citizens of Fort Macleod. Personally, I've never seen so many people on board. We have a couple that are above and beyond, to tell you the truth, and without your help, we don't have this success, so thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. Before I introduce our next panel member, I would be remiss if I didn't thank our local RCMP detachment. They are a very important and intricate members within our community. They work incredibly hard, and it's always important to thank them for the job that they do and the service they provide. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Sergeant Muha.
Thank you very much, Sue. So for my part, I have three separate discussion topics that I want to get through here this afternoon. The first one is more of a statistical analysis report of things that are going on in Fort Macleod, and they really are a differentiation between what happened in 2019 and in 2020. So from January to September 2020, there's been a 22% increase in property crimes over 2019. So between the months of January to September of 2020, the same months of January to September 2019, there's a 22% increase in property crime. Break-and enters have dropped by 20% in September. So all the way up to August, we were having some issues, and then we've had a drop in September, and then to a 51% increase over 2019. There's an 8% drop in overall property crime from August to September. The SAD Crime Reduction Unit here with Sergeant McLaren has deployed to Fort Macleod on several occasions, and the June and July 2019 statistics correspond to the low occurrence rates for 2019 and 2020. And as expected, the scans engagement in August of 2020 has also coincided with a decrease in our property crime rates. So overall, the property crime stabilized over the summer and is a further minus 65% lower than at its highest in February. So February was a really bad month for 2020 in property crimes in Fort Macleod, and things have seemed to turn a corner for us, probably for a variety of reasons with all of the work that we're doing on the side. Getting more specific into some of the crime events that are happening, theft under $5,000 primarily is occurring from motor vehicle, and it represents 4% of the total for district. So in Fort Macleod, 4% of the total for district for theft of under $5,000 from motor vehicles is in Fort Macleod. Theft of motor vehicles, which was the highest in K Division, has decreased by 20%. So a lot of vehicles being stolen. Of the unsolved cases, one is related to a license plate being recovered and swapped. So that was specific to that one. Break-and enters have decreased by 20% over the last month. Break-and enters in Fort Macleod represent 5% of all the break-and enters in Southern Alberta District, which is a fairly high number. So we know that we have issues here, but we also know that we're working as hard as we can to try and reduce that. Those that did occur were the result of many unlocked garage doors, many lack of surveillance images, or poor image quality, or some of the reasons why we can't seem to solve some of the concerns that are happening. Theft over $5,000 has decreased by 30% since August. So combined efforts with the detachment, the crime reduction unit, the scan unit, as well as our Safe Community Task Force, I think, are starting to have us see a corner turned here. Now that brings me into my next little presentation. So part two of my discussion is with respect to crime prevention through environmental design. So what does crime prevention through environmental design mean? The acronym is CPTED, but its purpose is for reduction in crime, reduction in the potential for crime, so trying to stop it from happening in the first place, decrease fear of crime in the community, revitalization of neighborhoods, increased positive activity in the area, empowers property owners to tackle crime, okay? Increased collaboration between municipality and the public, improved and beautification of physical environment, and opportunities for increased community connectedness. And it takes me into what they call the 4 Ds. Just taking a note here. The 4 Ds, and that is to deter, to detect, to delay, and to deny. Okay? So in a comprehensive crime prevention through environmental design scenario, we talk about natural surveillance. So we're talking about fencing, trees, bushes, sight lines, blockages, things that where people might go in to commit offenses because they feel comfortable that they're not being observed in some way. We also talk about access control, locking things, fencing, proper storage of property, um, territoriality. So territoriality really comes down to signage. Uh, signage on, we've got video surveillance, signage on this is private property, silence on there's an alarm system, signage. So that's the territoriality side. We're basically telling people that are going to commit crimes that we own this property and that we're watching for you. Okay. And then exterior maintenance of buildings, high grass, trees that are overgrown, maybe many trees that are blocking sight lines into a residence or a building or a business. So yeah, so that's kind of where we get to these 4Ds. That's the deter part, is to try and clean up the properties. Lighting is also a huge factor. And I know we've discussed city lighting and street lighting for years, and there's a thought pattern to maybe try and work through that. But lighting outside of any commercial building, lighting outside of people's residential buildings, motion lighting, all that sort of thing really helps. Because I know that if I'm going to walk into your backyard and that light comes on and it's bright as the sun, I probably don't feel like being there anymore. So these sorts of things help. The second of the 4Ds is to detect. So access control issues, intrusion detection, alarms on gates, entrances, patrols. COP is very helpful with that at times when they're out there, which is great. CCTV surveillance from houses or businesses. Duress enunciation, so again, fence alarm soundings and things like that. The third D is the delay, which is ensure that we try and delay those people that are going to commit crimes, having well-maintained fences and exteriors. Don't make it easy with holes to pass through, broken fences, things like that. They talk about defense in layers, so not just have a camera system, maybe have a camera system with lighting, with proper fencing, with all of the bushes trimmed away from the buildings, that sort of thing. Harden entries or weak points. So spot weld fence joints, just little things like that that are considered good practices. And then the fourth D is the deny. So if you have multiple layers of protection around your stuff, your property, and what's your response to an alarm? If an alarm goes off, does it go to the police? Is it you that's going to be attending, or is it a hybrid of that? And really the totality of how robust your security program is important. And then they're talking about patrol or static guard. Now I know a lot of businesses in town may or may not have people working or employed that are guarding the building as a resource, but there's a possibility that could happen. Some do's and don'ts. With your cameras, for example, with your surveillance, is will you just get a blob in the field if you have your camera pointed out into the darkness? Like if you're going to see something, we want to be able to try and actually see what it is. That might include lighting. I know that we've had video surveillance come into us where there was a light at the other side of the yard and the light was so bright that it was actually obscuring the video as well. So these sorts of things you want to think about, because if you've got a light shining at your camera and then you can't see what's in between, it's difficult. So be strategic as to where you're placing your cameras. What will you see when that video comes to you and to the police? What are we seeing? Are we seeing somebody going into entryways, or are we just looking out into an empty lot that maybe isn't as important? So those sorts of things to be thinking about. Can we find out what kind of a vehicle it is? Is the camera good enough of quality to be able to get that kind of detail. It's important. Are there natural choke points in your property that are ideal for covert cameras, or consider trail cams, for example? Somewhere where they have to come in or have to come out, or where they're more likely to come into your property or come out. You know, if they go in and commit a crime and then they walk out at a certain vantage point and you have a camera there that maybe they don't see, I mean, maybe we'll get a face or a real good idea of what they were wearing, or a license plate or a vehicle description, things like that. Obviously, place valuable objects in the camera view. That would be important. And good for monitoring load shipment as it leaves a location. And then, yeah, just territorial reinforcement is really signage. Have signage up, whether it's our property is protected by video, or it's alarmed, or you know, private property, or do not enter, dog on guard. Whatever it is you want to put out there, the signage may deter somebody from walking in there. There's all kinds of different signs, private property. I just have a list of them here. Security notice, this property is protected by surveillance. Warning, neighborhood watch, crime prevention zone, private property keep out, just any kind of signage that may have somebody thinking twice. Now, your real criminals are not going to read the sign and be deterred by that, but it's maybe a starting point. Maintenance, I just have a photo here of a house that's overgrown with weeds and trees. If somebody was to go into this property that I am looking at here on this photo, and it's too bad we couldn't put it up, but that's fine. Just envision a house in a yard. The grass is tall, there's trees and bushes all around that house. Is there access points for people who are committing criminal offenses to the property to be hiding in there? I mean, they could be in there for hours and go in through windows that are all blocked from sight lines, and nobody would even know. So cleaning up those types of properties and the maintenance of property is important. And then I have a bit of a recap. Questions: what surveillance do you have? Is it overt or covert? Meaning, is it out in the open or is it hidden? More valuable and mission critical pieces, they need more attention. So more valuable property will need more attention. Detection points, surveillance, mechanical, active lighting, right? So lighting that comes on when there's motion. Perimeter alarms if you get complicated. What is the perception the criminal has of your property? Is that an easy target for me, or is that going to be a difficult one? That may be a deterrent. Risk of detection. If that individual goes onto that property, what is their feeling of, am I risking being detected here? That could be a deterrent as well. Can they see valuables? Obviously, when we're talking about theft from motor vehicles, if your laptop's sitting in there, your wallet's sitting in there, your valuables are right in plain sight, they will go into your vehicle. And that's no different when we're talking about a property, whether it's commercial or residential. If they see a generator, if they see a truck that has keys in it, if they see this property that they're looking for, they're going to go and take it. So, but yeah, that's really what I wanted to discuss about the CPTED, or the crime prevention through environmental design. Are there any questions on there that we can work through at this point? I know we were going to kind of leave it to the end, but sure.
Okay, the first question is, can we have these posted on the Facebook page? Yes, it is shared on the Facebook page. This YouTube link, you are welcome to share that. If you go to the Town of Fort Macleod on Facebook, you will find it there. The second question is, would having a security service with patrols benefit for business?
Absolutely, that would benefit for business. I think in those cases, it just becomes a cost versus a risk scenario for any business. But I mean, obviously, if you have people around your businesses at all hours of the night, it's going to be a deterrent for sure.
Our next question, can you please share the Trespass Act and where the sign should be?
Okay, so I don't have that readily available right now, but it's something we can certainly provide the link for. Yep. And just a quick little follow-up is we do have 3 pamphlets here. I have them now at the town hall. We also have them at the RCMP detachment. One of them is called All Valuables Removed, and that's with respect to keeping valuables in your vehicles. One of them is a business security pamphlet, Simple Steps for Protecting Your Business. And one is for home security, Simple Steps for Protecting Your Home. Now, these aren't the be-all, end-all of ideas, but it potentially gets you started in the right direction.
Quick question, Brian. Can we share some of the environmental design tips that you presented? Will you share that package with us so that we can post it? Because I think that would be of a value to our residents as
Yeah,
well.
absolutely. I'll send the presentation over, and I just took parts of it, and I'll send that over to you guys for sure. Okay, I'm going to change directions here. We're going to now talk about another topic of interest for the community, and that is hate-motivated crimes and incidents. So I want to follow up on a criminal mischief incident that occurred about 3 months ago, right at the end of summer. We had a pride flag that was vandalized. And when I say pride flag, I'm talking about LGBTQ2 pride flag was vandalized and burned outside of the private residence here in Fort Macleod. And so the message I have is that the RCMP nationally, and more specifically here at the Fort Macleod Detachment, are committed to upholding the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Section 15 of the Charter says that every individual is equal before and under the law and has the right to the equal protection and equal benefit of the law without discrimination, and in particular without discrimination based on race, national or ethnic origin, color, religion, sex, age, or mental or physical ability. Now, to go to the Alberta side, Alberta Human Rights Act prohibits discrimination in employment based on the protection grounds of race, color, ancestry, place of origin, religious beliefs, gender identity, gender expression, age, physical disability, mental disability, marital status, family status, source of income, and sexual orientation. So where am I going with this? Okay, well, there are times when these types of discriminatory incidents are reported to the police and criminal investigations are initiated. The Calgary Police Service have a really good video that we are about to show you, and hopefully the audio works for everybody out there. But it is a great explanation of hate crimes and hate-motivated crimes. So if we could play that, Miranda, for our audience.
People often ask me, is saying or doing something offensive a hate crime? It's actually much more complicated than you realise. In Canada, the criminal code covers both hate speech and hate-motivated criminal offences. Hatred is more than a strong dislike. It's an intense and extreme vilification of a group that singles them out for ill treatment. If somebody is assaulted and they're targeted because of their sexuality or their race, that's a hate crime. If that person's convicted at court, then evidence is brought forward to the court to show that their hate bias is an aggravating factor. This allows the court to be able to increase the sentencing of that person. It's really important that we report all incidents of hate bias to the police service, even if you think there isn't a criminal offence. By reporting it to the police, this allows us to make the final determination, and it also provides us invaluable statistical information.
Okay, we're back. Thank you. I hope everybody was able to hear the, that video, but Miranda will post that as well in the chat log, for the link to that video. It's important, right at the end there, it says our community is, everybody in our community is responsible, to report, and to help to deal with these issues with hate crimes. You know, reading recent articles in the Fort Macleod Gazette, it's very promising to see most of the comments, or pretty much all of the comments, supporting diversity and rallying around our right to equality or equity and inclusion. I also know that the town of Fort Macleod is committed to protecting the rights of its citizens with respect to diversity, equity, and inclusion, even to the point where we have a sign posted at the edge of town that reads, "Fort Macleod is a proud member of the Canadian Coalition Against Racism and Discrimination." Um, so with the exception, in my mind, of a few individuals, I believe we've come a long way in the right direction, but we still have a lot of work to do. And, you know, the starting point there is the community, the town of Fort Macleod, and us as the RCMP. So I just wanted to put that out there for everybody to understand where our thoughts are on that. And I think that's the end of my discussion.
Thank you, Brian. I'd like to ask Gary to address our wonderful community.
Thank you for having me. Once again, my name is Sergeant Gary McLaren, and I'm in charge of the Rural Crime Reduction Unit for Southern Alberta. I know my criminal analyst was here at the previous meeting, Paul Lankin, and I think disclosed a little bit of what we do. I'll give you a very brief kind of idea of how we work. We're made up of a 10-member team of 8 very experienced police officers, which I'm extremely lucky to have, ranging in service from 8 to 20 years of service. We also have 1 criminal analyst and 1 administrative support staff, which keeps the paperwork flowing to keep us on the road as much as possible and out of the office. Our area is quite broad and large. We go from the town of Bowden to the north, all the way down to the Canada-US border, and the Saskatchewan and BC borders. Our work has brought us across the Saskatchewan border after targets, and as far as Cranbrook in BC after targets as well. Our criminal analysts in the program, including additional criminal analysts in headquarters in Edmonton, look at your community and the data down here in Fort Macleod and determine your crime rates, as Brian has spoken about here today, and help identify as to where you fall of how we prioritize where we go. Fort Macleod is ranked higher than most communities over the last year and a half, which has taken us down here multiple times. One of the things that we do, obviously, through the criminal analyst is determine what kind of crime, who's committing them, and why those people are committing the crimes. From our trips down here and from analyzing who's involved, who's committing those crimes, illegal drugs was obviously identified as the specific reason behind basically almost all the crime here, 90% of it, and about 10% of the crime that occurs in Fort Macleod is pretty much from geography of just having Highway 3 running through the middle of your town and people coming through. As recently as last week, you had a business broken into, 3 vehicles stolen. Those vehicles were then used in an attempted ATM theft in Lethbridge. So that again was the location, and having the highway here does contribute to a little bit of it. From using that numerical data collected by analysts and passed down to the investigators, 2 streets in Fort Macleod were quickly identified as the problem areas, which I think were addressed at the last time, and I know the SCAN team has been very engaged in trying to control what's going on in those 2 areas with home evictions, which in my past experience of previous postings in crime reduction has been extremely effective. Some of the other things that the team does, besides obviously determining who commits and why, we also try to mentor members in other detachments when we come down, whether it's writing search warrants, which we have a very experienced team in doing, and supplying them additional resources to give the detachment, to allow them to still be primary investigators on the file if they want to be. If they don't want our team to take it over, we will provide surveillance. We are a covert team. Our vehicles are unmarked. We are not uniformed members, so you don't notice us in your community. We will identify ourselves to community members if we are asked who we are. In most cases, we also do notify the detachment when we are coming so that they're not surprised that we're here. If you see these cars parked on your street, obviously in small towns, surveillance can become a little bit more challenging just because small town, you immediately recognize that car doesn't belong here, that's not my neighbor, which is fantastic. We love to hear that. Residents of Fort Macleod have welcomed us with open arms. We talk to them. I can't say enough good things about them. They've let us park in their driveways, watch different targets that we're watching in town or different homes, which has been fantastic. And we've experienced that all over rural Alberta, of rural landowners allowing us to go on their property to do surveillance, or to even go on and look for people that are using their property for illegal purposes. On their Crime Stoppers tips are something that are fantastic. You know, keep them coming. I know there are Crime Stoppers tips coming in from Fort Macleod on people, their neighbors, or things that they've heard. We love hearing that, and that data, again, is used to help us, you know, not only find who did it, but to also, it reports a lot of crime that sometimes isn't reported to Fort Macleod detachment, and without those crimes being reported, it doesn't reflect a accurate number on the crime stats for your particular area, both in town and your rural area. So yes, keep those coming in. Keep your complaints coming in about absolutely everything, because if I know a lot of time you think it's something small and the local police are not going to have time to deal with it, but just having that reported is extremely important, and it does mean that you're going to get our attention even more than you already have. We've been here, I think, 10 times this year. We've been in some pursuits through town here. Things like that. We've caught drug traffickers back in the summer here. Fentanyl is obviously in your town. Last night we actually did a drug takedown just outside of Fort Macleod here, just south of Granham, and charged one individual with trafficking in opioids last night, which were, that was an investigation which the crime reduction team had been doing for approximately 3 weeks. Those drugs were bound for Fort Macleod, Picani, and Pincher Creek, and Coaldale is most likely where, from the work the team had done to determine where those are going. We're also looking at many other drug traffickers in this area, since that's been identified as majority of the reason for the crime in your community. A lot of the crime that happens here, if we take 10 11th Street out, the residents that we'd identified on that street, most of the people committing the crime in that 90% range were going to visit people at those addresses. We observed that in our surveillance, and some of those people gave those addresses to police that don't live there. So they were definitely responsible for a lot going on. But with that being said, your neighboring communities contribute to that as well, whether it be you know, a major community like Lethbridge or any of the smaller ones like Pincher and things like that. You also have residents of there that are coming through, same drug traffickers supplying all the communities. So a lot of that is outside of Fort Macleod Police Control, RCMP, and that's where we come in to kind of link those all together and go after those drug traffickers that are operating out of the area. And when, as much as we can, we make sure we're sharing this intelligence with Brian and his detachment as well, so all these detachments are aware, and as well other police forces such as Lethbridge and Tabor and Calgary Police, all the other municipal forces. We've become much better over the last years at sharing intelligence between municipal forces and the RCMP, which is probably one of the most important advances we've made in solving rural crime especially. One of the major things that the Crime Reduction Unit has done the last year, you had a armed robbery in Grantham last year. We were assigned to take on that role. We were able to identify who that robbery suspect was. It turned out he was responsible for, this was actually what we would call a professional armed robber. He was responsible for 7 armed robberies in southern Alberta and 1 in southeastern British Columbia as well. So we were able to locate and arrest that suspect safely after approximately 2-month investigation and lay multiple firearm and robbery charges against that individual. We've also taken on other things in rural areas such as kidnappings of rural area people where we've laid charges in as well. We've multiple prolific property crime offenders. We've recovered front-end loaders, track hose, multiple skidsters in the millions of dollars range, multiple vehicles, utility trailers, and we also identify a lot of people that are on higher risk warrants as well, and we will go out and arrest those people in the safer manner. That's not a traditional manner where you see a marked police car come up, turns lights on. A lot of times these people run to get away. These times, a lot of times we're doing surveillance on them. We're in unmarked vehicles. We'll pull up at the grocery store unsuspectingly and arrest them. So there's less danger to the public. There's no police pursuit, things like that to maximize public safety. Yeah, that's about kind of it. We are operating in Fort Macleod's area. We will be back down here a lot of the next 2 weeks as well on another project. I wish I could share with the community all the different techniques we use to investigate and to try to solve and crime and catch these people. But obviously, we don't want the bad guys to know. So, but yeah, thank you.
Maybe just go back to some of the questions that are on the list there. I can probably deal with a couple of them.
Okay, so the first step is, what should I engrave on my tools?
Okay, so as far as going back, thank you very much. As far as going back to identifying your property, anything that's identifiable to you, anything that you can say, this engraving or this set of letters or a serial number or any sort of identifier that you can say to the police in a statement will be on that property. So some people put their initials. I might put a number such as my RCMP regimental number, maybe. I don't know why I would do that, but that's just a possibility. You could have any number identifier on there. It would be fine. Yeah. And there's a couple below there.
Okay, so the next one is, can we educate more on what these drugs look like to protect our children and our community?
Yeah, we should probably do a better job of that. I think the internet, although you have to be careful, is probably a really good spot to get photos of the various things, because it changes so often what these things look like, how they're packaged. Like, it's not as consistent as you would think. And so I think finding a good site, maybe even, like, I'm not exactly sure where, rather than me bringing my exhibits out from the detachment, because there is a danger there of exposing myself to that sort of thing. But there's definitely photos of what methamphetamine looks like. There's definitely photos of what the opioids look like. You know, whether they're in a powder form or they're in a pill form or whatever, those would probably be the best places to look. I guess the only question is it might not be specific to what we're seeing locally at the time, right? So it's a tough one to try and educate by photographs, but yeah.
Yeah, just for local residents, like we've had done 3 fentanyl seizures in about the last 3 weeks, and what it looks like, if I'm sure most people can kind of know what the candy nerds look like. Um, if you don't, the other one I would say is kind of pop rocks, and those are what it's looking like right now. Most of what we're seeing out there is pink in color or kind of a strawberry color. Or a purple is what's coming out there. And that's what it kind of looks like. It's kind of a smooth in the fentanyl is kind of if you look at what Nerds Candy looks like, that's what you're going to see. And that's what the most concerning thing if small kids get on it, because that's the first thing I think of every time that we see it when we seize it, or the Pop Rocks candy. They've really adapted the colors of it looks attractive if you're smaller. So it is something that I can try to definitely help Fort Macleod. We can see if we can take some really close-up photos of it and kind of see if we can so you can see more of the size and stuff like that. And I can try to send that down to Brian if he's comfortable sending that to the group. We can definitely do that with methamphetamine as well, and just kind of show you what it looks like. It can definitely come in various colors, but primarily right now it is pink and purple.
One more little piece. Just a little question there was, why is there a push to legalize narcotics in the larger cities like Vancouver? And so I don't know a lot about what's going on in Vancouver, but I know there is an ideology that's pressing that is stating that personal possession and use of drugs is not a criminal justice issue, and that it's a health issue. And so when we talk about the question, it's not legalizing narcotics, but it's decriminalizing narcotics. And so those are two different things. The narcotics wouldn't continue to be legal, but they would be decriminalized, meaning you wouldn't be looking at criminal offense. It would be more of provincial, similar to Bill 20, the one that's coming out right here at the beginning of December for impaired driving, 26 or 21. Anyway, all the impaired driving laws are changing. They're decriminalizing impaired driving, although the criminal side of it is still going to be there as an option for us, but it's similar to that. And so they're looking at it as a health and social issue and not a police issue, or they're trying to look at it that way to see if they can maybe deal with the issue differently, because they're still having people overdose on the streets regardless of what enforcement actions are in place. So
Thank you, and thank you, Gary. That was very informative and much appreciated. Lisa.
Thank you. I am speaking on behalf of Wes Noble, our bylaw enforcement officer, and I'll just share a little bit about what his highlights have been for October and his focus a little bit going forward here. In October, most of his calls were regarding animal control, so we do continue to see dogs running at large a lot in Fort Macleod. So we are encouraging owners to ensure that their dogs are licensed as well as contained within their own properties or in their house and not left outside in their yards to escape. We also had a few vehicles parked in alleyways and blocking alleyways, and so we are asking residents to be mindful of that and to not block alleyways when they're parking. Wes has reached out to several citizen inquiries this month and spoke to several people regarding the snow bylaw and how that's impacting our pedestrians and any foot traffic. So we do remind residents within 24 to 48 hours to remove as much snow as possible from sidewalks that are adjacent to their property, including the avenues. Town crews will do their best to clear the avenues if they have time, but it is the owner's responsibility. So we do remind avenue property owners of that. But other than that, he is doing his bike patrols and foot patrols. I should say the bike patrols have ended for the season, but he is still walking out and about on Main Street and around town. So if you see him, please stop and say hi. If you have any questions for him, he's happy to answer them. A quick reminder that if people do want to place complaints, the best way to do it is to file an official complaint with the town, and then we can officially move forward with it. Statements are, of course, always helpful when we're talking to residents about incidents or nature, that type of thing. So again, just a reminder that you can reach out and ask questions anytime. Wes is doing his best to get back to people 24 to 48 hours after an email or an inquiry comes in. So again, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to the town.
Thank you, Lisa. It's my pleasure to actually bring the community up to speed on the initiatives and the files currently that the Safe Communities Task Force is involved with, either collectively as a group or as individual agencies. Before I get into some of the details of that, I would also like to acknowledge two of our key partners that aren't here today and are critical members of our task force, which is Park Enterprises, that helps us with home inspections, as well as Alberta Health Services. So just wanted to acknowledge their participation. Before I go into the list, I would like to just remind our community that with the introduction by council and approval by council several months ago of the new community standards bylaw, it has enabled the town of Fort Macleod to be more diligent and a little bit more hard-nosed about some of the issues that we've been facing throughout the community with regard to drug dealers, with regard to homes, with regard to landowners that do not live in town but rent properties here. And by saying that, I'd also like to let our residents know that the costs of the task force, which have been significant for a small community, we are now able to roll over onto the tax roll and collect legal costs as well as demolition and abatement costs from the landowners to minimize the impact on the taxpayer, as well as to recognize that the taxpayer should not be on the hook for these delinquent individuals. So that being said, I am going to let the community know that currently we have 24 files open as the town of Fort Macleod. Well, we have 24 files. I shouldn't say they're all open. Of those 24, we have 8 closed now. But I want to give you an update on some of the properties that we are looking at and we're staying diligent on, and we'll be continuing to either work with the landowners or continuing to put pressure on the landowners to clean up the properties. So 218 11th Street, the homeowner is evicting the tenants, and once that is completed, we'll clean up the remaining requirements afterwards. 348 11th Street, the homeowner has evicted the tenant and plans to demolish that building. 325 8th Street, an extension has been granted to the homeowner, or the landowner, I should say, until June 1st, 2021, to have all requirements of the order met, and if it's not met, the structure will be demolished. 312 9th Street, we were challenged on the court order. The court order stands and was upheld by the justice. The property owner was awarded an extension, however, to the deadline to November 30th. Some requirements have been met since then, so he's put some effort into it, but we will be revisiting that on November 30th. 357 11th Street, it's cleanup ready, which is great news. There's a couple things left to do on that property, which will be happening in due course. 307 10th Street, I know I was asked about this, a resident popped in last week. All of the exterior items and debris have been removed. The building and fence will be demolished. We are just waiting for ATCO Gas to come in and remove the gas line, and the abatement for asbestos has been completed as well. So we're very hopeful that that particular property will be demolished before the end of the year. 218 16th Street. There is still some work to be done on that property, but 3 full loads of garbage have been removed from that property. 127 11th Street, we have a 546 order pending. And that's really all I can tell you about that one. We have several, 135 11th Street, 438 11th Street, 450 11th Street, and 401 11th Street. Wes is in contact with the landowners, and we have some upgrading, or they have some upgrading to do and cleanup to do on those properties, and notices are pending. 336 10th Street, 546 order has been served. That is the house that is boarded up, that was involved in the drug bust earlier this year. There's a bank involved in those discussions now. So we anticipate that action will be taken relatively quickly here, and we hope to have that one addressed before the end of the year as well. 149 22nd Street, 546 order is pending. And 358 11th Street, I have been in contact with the landowners myself. Trailers have been moved from that site, and the landowners have been very cooperative in assisting the town with getting that property cleaned up as well. I will advise that it may seem like the process is slow, and in fact it is very slow. We pretty much have to go through court on every single one of these issues. And so I do ask that residents continue to be patient. All of us are working very diligently on making the town of Fort Macleod a safer community, as well as cleaning it up as much as we can with the assistance and cooperation of the landowners that I've identified already. That being said, I would like to just say to the panel today that we really have appreciated your involvement in assisting us in the town of Fort Macleod. We need you. We need your continued support with moving this agenda forward. Council is very appreciative. I know the residents that I've had an opportunity and businesses are also very appreciative too. So I want to thank you all very much for being involved in assisting us as we move forward with this initiative. I know to all our residents and businesses, I want to thank you all for participating today and letting you know that our next town hall to bring you more updates will be in March of 2021. We committed to a quarterly process, and we plan on living up to that. I also appreciate that we have some very challenging times here in our province, in our town, in the country, with COVID and with the economy. It's very hard sometimes to stay positive in moving forward through these challenging times. But that being said, and on a more positive note, I would like to wish everyone in our community a very Merry Christmas and a holiday season, as the holidays are just around the corner, and to be safe and stay healthy. And with that being said, thank you very much for joining us today. And by all means, again, if you have any questions, always feel free to reach out to the town office, myself, Lisa, or Wes, and or the RCMP. And thank you.